Sunday Talks with the Marshmallow Man.
Hey, I'm Ossie from Three Monkey Solderless, home of the world's best cables for your pedalboard needs. DC, audio, all kinds of cool colors. We got a sale going on at the site, so check us out at threemonkeysolderless.com. Okay, so welcome back to Sundays with the Marshmallow Man. That's the marshmallow. And this is where we kind of do some Q&A and some more discovery and get some ideas and get some things flowing in this spot where we chase that tone. So we've got questions from last week's episode. Some good questions in there, some good information, some stuff that we could definitely talk about. So let's just dive right in and see what we got, right? And we'll look at these questions and see what we can add to the discussion. All right, so first of all, we've got from Tim O'Keefe. Hey, Tim, good to hear from you. I love all the ground you're covering, Ozzy, but what I really appreciate is that it's posed primarily as questions. Really look forward to these Sunday videos. Thank you for all you do and for the inquisitive nature and spirit of it all. No problem. I like doing them. I mean, this is fun for me. It really is. It's a lot of fun kind of digging in and sharing some finds, or we find stuff together or figure out what's going on. So yeah, posed as questions. Yeah, everything should always be like a question, right? if you're trying to solve a problem, right? So I always thought that in terms of coming to an answer, you have to question everything. Nothing can be on or out of bounds, right? It's sort of like the Socratic method, right? Question everything, debate back and forth. Every little bit of it should be gone over, and no possibilities should be eliminated. And I definitely don't feel like, there's an answer to any of this yet, right? There are definite, getting closes to everything, getting very close to everything. But in the end, what we're doing is sort of surmising what could have happened and then trying those things out and seeing which of those sort of actions get us closer to the desired effect, right? So until we go back in a time machine and sneak into Sunset Sound and open up everything at night and then kind of be a fly on the wall while Don was mixing and Ted was there at the board, all of this is, going to be supposition, and we're going to try to get as close, but we probably will never know, right? So thanks for the question, Tim. All right, so we got one from John Marshall. Thanks, Ozzy. I really like these deep dives. I think the Silver Jubilee's lead channel is the same as what you described, plus diode clipping. Well, I mean, I think, in the 70s, late 70s and 80s, there were a lot of guys that were kind of more, modding Marshalls, whether it be in England or whether it been in LA or New York or what have you. And, everybody sort of notices what each other is doing, right? And we take cues from each other. So I can remember, getting that amplifier right there, right? Which I bought when I was in college, like sophomore in college. So I was like 18, maybe something like that. And I bought it at this place in Hartford where I went to school. And I I don't know who got the better of this deal actually, because that's obviously, a really cool amp, and it's been with me forever and I love it. But I traded a San Dimas Charvel that was in a chartreuse metal flake, the whole thing, the fretboard, the neck, it had painted on shark inlays. It was a dual humbucker, had a black Kaler on it. It was an early San Dimas guitar, right? Definitely custom. And I had gotten that at a place where I think, Ace Frehley used to trade in equipment on his way to Atlantic City to go blow tons of money. So I never knew whose guitar this was, but that thing was sitting in the window of Sam Ash, right in White Plains when I was in high school. And we used to drive up to Sam Ash all the time in New York and just like oogle everything that we couldn't afford. I mean, I met so many interesting people. I met Paul Reed Smith there. I met, so many people. It was so interesting in the 80s. And this gold Charvel, this chartreuse metal flake gold Charvel was in the window. And eventually I got it, right? And then I traded it for that. But when I was in that store buying that amplifier, there was a guy who was pretty knowledgeable around, older than me, and had a pretty good collection of vintage Marshalls and had a lot of them modified. And he was like, I want you to look at this silver Jubilee amp that just came in. And I was like, cool. He's like, this is basically like, what Jose was doing to amplifiers. I think they basically took what was done to Jose, what Jose did rather to their stuff, and they started doing it. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But yeah, I think the Silver Jubilee is kind of like that 80s modded Marshall, taking a little bit from here, there, and there, and slamming it all together into a production amp for the company. So yeah, that's a very astute observation there, John. I appreciate that. Okay, we got Johnny Echo again. Yay, Johnny. Thanks for your detailed answer and explanation, Ossie. I definitely agree that it could have been a preamp gain control of some sort. I like that Ed may have tried a cascade. A cascade is like multiple gain stages that are sort of slammed into each other, which is not a stock sort of deal. That's getting into the Jose thing. May have been a cascade and even decided he didn't like it. I also read somewhere claiming it was a secondary standby switch, which I don't buy at all. Okay, I mean, there's always a grain of truth in a game of telegram or telephone, right? Which is what we're playing in this world. So I have some similar sort of thoughts regarding all that, right? Now, I definitely know that, or I've heard, don't know, I have heard, right? Because I used to read anything I could find, before really the internet was around. I'd read everybody's stuff, right? So someone had, I don't remember where I was, whether I was at Rudy's in Manhattan or somewhere else, but they had a book that was written by Funk from Funk Amplifiers. And I was thumbing through it, and there was a page where he was talking about having worked with Ed, and he basically Ed had come to the conclusion after working with him. And this is the only place I've ever heard of Funk working with Eddie, right? It was in his book. And he said he thought the cascaded thing sounded too distorted. Now, granted, that's, oranges and apples, right? So a Funk amp versus, a Jose amp versus a Soldano. We all know that he eventually started cascading many channels together, right? Over time, going from, the Jose amps, which were probably cascaded maybe. I've seen, some pictures of the inside of supposed Ed Tour amps, and they're not cascaded, right? It's just an internal jump in a Jose Master. But, could have been. And then later you had the Soldano, which is definitely cascaded. And then you had the 5150s, right? And that whole series, which was a lot of cascaded stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it's possible that he had it in and took it out. By the time that we saw everything, it was unmodified. So, yeah, that's definitely a possibility. Regarding the second standby switch. Now, that's something that Jose used to do as well. And my Jose has a remote standby on it, but it's a jack, right? So basically, when you're dealing with multiple amplifiers, you may want to flip off amps that aren't being used and put them on standby. And what Jose did for a standby switch was not cut the voltage to the tubes like from the high volt, but rather lift the cathodes on the power tubes, right? So when he just had a jack that all the tubes were connected to their cathodes, right? And when you could plug a foot switch into there and disconnect the cathodes from ground, and the amp would go into a standby, right? And that was sort of like the remote standby switch. So in my amplifier, it's very close to the speaker jacks. So I'm thinking I wouldn't put it, we talked about that before, about being all the way on the end of the chassis, right? So I don't really see that as being possible or not possible, being a great place to put it. So, yeah, I'm not necessarily buying that too much, All right, so we'll move forward down the list. We got Plexi Dust. Hey, Plexi Dust. These are always interesting from Plexi. Ozzy, so happy about these discussions. Love the content. Thank you, Plexi. I hope you understand my first question was a starter. Absolutely. Absolutely. And included a kitchen sink thing. Sure. Yeah, I mean, throw it in. This is what we got to do. We're going to have a spaghetti fight, right? And we're throwing spaghetti all over the place and see what sticks. I thought it could be benefit the in-channel with a place to start. It definitely did. Yeah, I know now. No shortage of discussion. I guess, right? I mean, this is sort of like the horse that won't die, that we just keep beating on it and see where it goes, right? But until it's solved, I mean, I still watch Kennedy videos, right? The Kennedy assassination stuff. I still watch all that stuff, and will we ever know? Probably not. Kind of like this. This is, the musical Kennedy assassination to me. So it always gives me ideas. You see, how can I say? There's an element, all right, it's sort of like a Zen. That's what I sort of feel like it, right? It's a thing that you can go to, a repetitive sort of thing, in which every time that you recycle this little action, something new pops out of it, right? And it's useful. It's sort of like when I listen to, let's say, like Led Zeppelin albums, right? Or I listen to classical music like Mozart. I listen to something like I've listened to, let's say, When the Levee Breaks 100,000 million times. And every time I hear it, I hear something different and it gives me a new idea, without exception. So listening to it is, people are like, how can you keep listening to this stuff over and over again? Don't you want to hear new music? I'm like, no, there's this is the universe is in this little song here. And every time I hear it, something new comes up and I have a new idea and it gives me an idea to go and do something. Same thing with like Eddie's music. A lot of that in the sounds, every time I hear something, it gives me a new idea. And every time I think about how this could have been done, it gives me a new idea. So it's sort of a Zen sort of thing, right? Zen in the art of motorcycle maintenance. Zen in the art of the brown sound. It's my kung fu. Okay, yeah, let's move on. We got Buzzed All Drink. What's up, Buzzed? Yes, I love the Felix Unger reference. Yeah, that was a great show, right? You got to love The Odd Couple. I spent probably too much time watching that stuff, right? It was so much fun. Words to live by. When you assume you make an ass out of you and me. Felix Unger. After seeing the video clip here on YouTube of Eddie playing on the David Letterman show, I am 100% convinced that amp is modified. Perhaps extra tube is concealed inside the chassis to keep its stock appearance. All right, that's one question. Let me read the rest of it, and then we'll go back. I always said if anyone can find me a stock Marshall that sounds like that, I will buy it. I have not come across one yet. I've never understood what the big deal was for Eddie wanting to keep secret that he had a modded amp. If the amp was stock, as he professed many times, then what did he need Jose for? For changing tubes? Thanks again, Ossie, you're the best. Well, thanks, Buzz. All right, so the Letterman show, I think I know the one you're talking about. I mean, I'm just reading these now, for the second time. I did a tiny bit of thinking 10 minutes ago, but it was 1984 tour. Ed's got the short hair. He's playing, with Paul Schaefer in the band. I think Valerie was probably one of the guests on that night. I might be confabulating that, but could be. Now that amp, by the time you can't know, because that amp doesn't sound like one to me. That sounds more like, the amp that he used on 5150 tour. The amp doesn't even sound like the amplifier that was used on that 1984 tour, which would have been what was going on around that time, I think. I could have that kind of mixed up. We could have been getting pretty close to the 5150 time. To me, that absolutely sounds like he either has a pedal in front of there or has an extra gain stage. It has a lot of mid-range that's very focused to it. So honestly, I'm kind of leading to I don't know. I really don't. Some pedals sound that way, right? Like an overdrive, an OD1, or a preamp tube. The way the Jose kind of cut out a lot of the top end could have very well been the Jose, extra gain stage mod for sure, right? And I've said that same thing for years. If you can bring me a stock Marshall, and by stock I mean every value is off a schematic for either, a 1959 lead circuit from 60, let's say 67 up to 72. Right? If you can find me any amp that sounds like that, I would give you $1 million because it's just not going to happen. Right? Something has to be different about it. Amp into cabinet, it's not going to sound like that. You could maybe change a few things in terms of the loading aspect and get closer as we're doing. But yeah, I agree with you, Buzzed. Absolutely. No question about it. Now, why did Ed have a secret? Well, I think that may be a product maybe of the Sunset Strip back in the 70s, where there were a lot of guitar players that we all know about kind of wandering around out there checking each other out, right? We had Randy Rhoads, Eddie Lynch, so many guys that were on that strip every night playing, and they were all trying to be the gunslinger, right? And how they got their sounds. And I could see, there being a little bit of paranoia, right? Like if they know how to get this sound, then I'm not going to be the one that everybody wants to go. I mean, the sound was a draw, right? It was a different thing. No one really heard that kind of a sound before. I think that was even unironically enough in a lot of the books written about that time, that people that had seen the club shows, they were just like, nobody had that sound but Ed, right? That was it. So, there was a lot of definite mysterious stuff going on, right? Like he had some kind of color sound box that was hollowed out. What's up with that, right? He had, Rudy suspiciously was hiding behind the amplifiers all the time. Like a couple of them, you could see him, snuck back behind the stacks. I mean, that's where guitar worlds sometimes are, right? Like on the road, you'll see they'll put a curtain behind all the amplifiers, and back behind there, there'll be like a little sort of tunnel, which is filled with the guitars and the techs that are kind of, watching through the curtain, which is, uses the effect of the light transparency one way in the curtains. They can see out, but you can't see them in there, right? So, I mean, yeah, techs would hide behind things, but what was he doing back there? He's also unplugging things that were blown up, probably doing all kinds of things. But yeah, there's always going to be secrets. I think he was just naturally that way, right? And when someone found out what he was doing or copied him, he kind of like turned the corner and did something else, right? Painting the guitars or, whatever it was. So let's, now we have some, some replies from other of our friends here to that post, to Buzz post. And the first is from Jamie Gusky. Howdy, Jamie. How you doing, buddy? And he's commenting to that question. Are you referring to when Ed was sitting with the band on Letterman? Yes. I always thought that amp had the mojo even at low volume. Hence being on the show, the Magic amp is sitting there and they're playing Pretty Woman and has the sound exuding from it. I can imagine that he was reamping, and if the sound is only achieved by paint peeling volume levels, let me expand this out. And if the sound is only achieved by paint peeling volumes, well then, since it wasn't set to those types of volume levels, modded. Okay, yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible. I've been to a couple of Letterman shows around that time, and I could tell you that, yeah, you wouldn't want to be loud in that early studio, right? That place was small. Now, later, when they moved into that bigger theater, I've been in there too. That's like a legitimate sort of small theater. And you could definitely get away with blasting the shit out of people. They're not going to like it, but you could definitely get away with it. And I think I saw the musical guest was Stevie Nicks the time I was in the big theater. So yeah, that wasn't going to be like Eddie sound, right? It wasn't going to be that loud. It was really good, but it wasn't like that. Yeah. So, it's an interesting question. That's another topic all in itself that we could do one day, is like the Letterman sound, right? That's a really cool sound. I think it's different than the first album sound. And I think, eventually maybe we'll expand out into the different sounds more too. All right. So, now we've got a reply from Buzz to Jamie. I said, yes, that's the clip I'm talking about. It always sounded like a modded amp to me. It's hard to tell. They can't hide anything off stage or behind the amp, etc., etc. I agree that's the sound to me too, but as I says often, we'll never know for sure. Yeah, we'll never know. Never know. I just don't see it. All right, let's move on. James Rickman, another great video, Ossie. Keep going. Well, thanks, James. I'm going to try. I intend to keep going for sure. Steak and cheddar. You're making me hungry. That sounds like dinner to me. Maybe that's tonight. A steak and cheddar sub, right? I got to clean up my diet a little bit, though. I've been kind of going and I hurt my knee a little bit, right? So I've been doing a lot of, and I couldn't do let's say, a lot of leg work, and I couldn't do a lot of exercise, and my leg kind of atrophied a little bit. So that was during maybe a year ago. So I've started to eat more to try while I'm working on my leg to try to build up the muscle a little bit around the knee, because I don't want to get surgery or anything like that on it. So yeah, it's starting to feel better. So I think it's time to get back to a more routine sort of diet, but maybe one less dance with the steak and cheese, right? A Philly cheesesteak would be pretty good. All right, so yeah, getting to the question, right? Forget about the steak. If you have a theory, I say build it. Isn't that what the chase is all about? Absolutely. All right, so I think what the theory was the different kinds of preamp ideas that extra knob would be for. So today we're going to test out one of the theories, and we're going to test it out just a little bit and see what you think. So hang on. Towards the end of the video, there'll be some noise made by the clamster himself. All right, we got a Herrera, Herrera, Harry Ra. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. If I'm not, I apologize. Hello, Ossie. My name is Francisco from Brazil. I've been following your channel for a while. Unfortunately, I don't speak English. Oh, yeah. Francisco, yeah. So I can't capture all the information you show in the videos. That's why I ask you, please, if you can activate the subtitles. I'm not sure how to do that. Let me look it up, as I didn't see this. But yes, I'll do that. If I can figure out a way to activate subtitles, I'll put that on there for you for sure. All right. Next is JBusk6298. I bet Rudy Lyron would know. It's possible. It's possible. Now, it depends upon how technical Rudy is, right? I've worked with a lot of people over the years, and it was explained to me one time that they're paramedics, not surgeons, right? So the idea is that they're skilled in keeping it going, right? That you figure out ways to just get things done to make sure that show happens as best as possible. And if something goes wrong on the show, that you're going to be able to figure out a way to do it. So they're guys that are very specialized in being able to come up with solutions, right? On the fly, under pressure, in the dark, right? So if you put a surgeon out in the field, they'd be like, I need to sterilize. Everybody shut up. Tell them to stop bombing us. Well, I can't think, it's a different mindset. So I've never met Rudy. I've met Zeke Clark, and actually we worked on an amp on the side of the stage at a Kenny Chesney show on a Marshall, right? There was a Marshall that was messed up. So there's me and Zeke on the side of the stage soldering this amplifier up, burning our fingers, right? That was a lot of fun. Yeah, I don't know. He might. Then again, he might not be the technical type, right? What was Jose there for then? He might have been the medic and Jose was a surgeon. So it'd be nice to hear, but I think a lot of people have talked to Rudy and he hasn't really spilled the beans too much. So we may have all we can get out of Rudy at this point. I don't know. Sounds good. All right, we got another from Plexi, which seems pretty in depth. So let me skip that, and then we'll move on to this last. All right, so the last one's from Jamie. Well, let me run up onto the sidewalk and take a look. Yeah. All right, so that's kind of like a reference to, I think, Yankee Rose, I'm guessing, right? From the David Lee Roth album with Steve Vai on guitar. All right, so let's go to the Plexi Dust, right? And there we go. And then we'll answer this, and then we'll test our experiment for the day. All right, so the knob seems plastic. Yeah, that one picture of it on the floor, right? It looks white, right? So it looks plastic. Weird knob in the world of pots. Well, there's something there. I have a unique perspective from making Ed's guitars, having an Ed amp sent my way and owning and chasing the same gear. That's really interesting, Plexi. You got to expand on that aspect of your particular experience. From making Ed's guitars, Are you Paul Unkert by any chance? I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe so, but that would be cool. You don't have to say or anything, but if you can relate some of your experience, did you work at Charvel or at, back when Boogie Bodies, for Ken Warmouth, or this could be really interesting. One of the Schecter guys, or Max, or this could be interesting, right? And having one of Ed's amps sent my way, and owning and chasing the same gear. The amp that you had sent his way. I'd love to hear about that too. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, so if you can, talk a little bit about that in the comments below. All right, so the first big deal thing for me was the Duncan Custom. Damn obvious, and no one talks about it. But here's the deal. Painstakingly close to a 71 small box with a 68 cab. It was all well, and then the Duncan literally scared me. The Duncan Custom was much, much tamer. Wow. In hindsight, the missing link, I'm going back. All right, so the painstakingly chose a 71 50-watt small box like that guy up right there, right? Damn obvious. No one talks about it. And that Duncan Custom literally scared me. The Duncan Custom was much, much tamer. Tamer than maybe the Mighty Might, I'm guessing. So, yeah, I did read this, I think when you first posted it, which was like the first day, right? And being the moron that I am, I found a 80s MJ wound Custom, right? Which is on its way. So we'll look into that. But I think the difference, right? So the Custom versus the Custom versus, let's say, the Mighty Mites. All right, so in the white guitar, right? In this white guitar, I have a Custom, right? An 80s MJ wound Custom. And it has an Alnico magnet in it. 13K, roughly low 13s, right? The Custom has the same coil lines, right, of 13, but has a ceramic magnet in it, right, which is going to make it a little bit brighter, possibly, right, and have a little bit more voltage output compared to the Alnico. Now, from my experience with the Duncan Distortion was around that time, all right, which is a different pickup than the Custom is, right? It has a ceramic magnet in it as well. So I have an idea of maybe what the Duncan ceramic magnets were. And compared to the Mighty Mite, I think they're thinner, right? The Mighty Mite magnet is a very tall, fat magnet, ceramic magnet. And it seemed like maybe the Duncan was maybe 3/4 the size of the Mighty Mite magnet. So that's going to be different. And of course, when you change a magnet's composition, you change its magnetic field, you change the way that it kind of works with the coil, the way that the strings interact with that magnetic field to work the coil, everything's going to change in terms of your resonant peak. It's going to give a different fingerprint, right? It's going to give you a different fingerprint. So we're going to get that Custom. I can't believe I didn't have one, right? I'm like, what was wrong with me because I did that pickup shootout, right? And I have all these different pickups, and I don't think the Custom was in there. And I'm like, was listed as the pickup, right? In the early Seymour Duncan brochure that Eddie called him up and said, "What are you doing? Take my name off that thing." Right? So, so many pickups were in and out of Ed's guitars. It's hard to know, right? But I would love to, I'm going to use the Custom, and maybe we'll do a quick 3 shootout, or I can record something. No, we'll do a shootout so that I got to record something. So today I'm going to record a quick little thing, and then we'll put the Custom into this where the Custom is, so that all variables are kind of like eliminated. All right, so we have a reply from Buzzed Aldrink to Plexidust's comment. I'm tongue-tied today. The knob is not weird at all. Appears to me to be a CTS pot with a plastic shaft. With no knob on it. Used by many vintage amps and still around today. Yeah, it's around today. Search CTS plastic shaft potentiometer and you will find them. The other thing that plastic pots were used in quite a bit, and I don't know why I thought there was a comment. regarding this. I have to find it now. I'm going to go into the comments section. All right, here's some more comments that we haven't gotten into. Read more. Okay. Is it possible that that was a solid state circuit? It's an interesting proposition, right? Let's see. We've got this one. I don't know why this didn't come up on our first page, right? But this is in the Creator Studio comment section. So it says, it's from These Go to 11, 1968. Good to hear from you, These Go to 11. It says, Dave Friedman, Mike Soldano, and John Suhr were all inside Ed's super lead, and every one of these highly respected amp builders stated the amp showed no signs of any major modifications. Dave Friedman said that many times how the small little tidbits that were changed were nothing and resulted in more gain in a Marshall super lead or anything that would change it drastically. I'm in the camp, the whole was for a line out. I'm not sure, 3 days ago I did it. All right, so yeah, Dave, Mike, and John Suhr definitely respected techs. Now, I think if you talk to them, I think they'll agree with this, that when they saw the amplifier, it had been rebuilt. Many times. We know of one particular case, and I think that was before Dave Friedman got it, was it went to a Dutch guy, right? And the thing was a mess, right? Apparently, according to the Dutch guy, when he received it, the amp was a mess, right? It looked like maybe so many people had been inside it and, had their way with it, that he decided that he was going to rebuild the whole thing, right? So he said that he took it down to studs and rebuilt it up, and it had used Teflon wire, right, to wire the whole thing up. Now, that was confirmed because I think Friedman mentioned that when he saw it, and Ed asked him to rebuild that amplifier for him, they brought him a mint or near mint 12 series super lead to scavenge for parts, right, to put into Ed's amp. And he basically used the wire from the surrogate amp, from the donor amp, because the amp as he saw it had Teflon wire in it. So it definitely had been molested without question. Now, there's no possibility that it was that I can't imagine that anybody that we know of had saw it in 1976 or 1977. I don't think any of those go to that point. So it's difficult to say. I definitely respect what you're saying, right? But I think when these guys saw it, it had already been pretty much, taken down. Let's see. There's another one. Okay, this is from Johnny Echo. I didn't expand the comment. That's why it wasn't there. So we're going back to this, right? So all that empty space, right? So Johnny was the one who was talking about whether it was a standby switch. And I didn't expand out the comment, so that's why I didn't see the rest of the question. All right, so the next question or proposition or supposition is all that empty space at the end of the chassis. Maybe someone even stuffed an overdrive pedal in there for all we know. It's possible. Well, the knob could have been there when it was the house amp at Rose Palace, which it was, right? Ed got that amp from the Rose Palace. And whatever they did to it, Ed got it in that condition. Was that knob there when he bought it? We don't know. I find it interesting that the residue of a sticker remains there directly next to the switch. It resembles the Arco electronic sticker that Jose put on some of his amps that he worked on. All right, so let me just refresh my memory here, right? Because I've got some photos of his amplifier from that time, right? And this is one that was printed in a Japanese magazine, right? And yeah, there is definitely some glue there for sure. Now let's look at this one. Yeah, I can even see the sticker in this one. I'm looking at the studio shot where Ed's holding a can of malt liquor. Right? And Dave has his broken foot all taped up and the amp's on the floor. So I'm going to try to blow this up a little bit more and take a look down there. This isn't the best photograph, or rather best photograph. There are higher qualities out there, but this is there. But there's definitely a white sticker next to the amp. Now, the Jose sticker I have on mine is clear, but that's not to say that Jose didn't have, a sort of opaque white sticker. So, yes. All right, so could it have been a solid state boost in front of there? Definitely. That is a possibility. All right, so let's talk about Howard Dumble. All right, so everybody knows Dumble amplifiers, right? So he was one of, sort of the early guys out there in California in the 70s and 60s modifying amplifiers for people, right? And one of the things he did, now this wasn't really, this wasn't a metal amplifier, right? It was more like a fusion amp or a blues amp or a slide amp or a really loud clean amp. But one of the things he did was have a 2 inputs on his amplifiers, right? One was an FET and one was normal. Now the FET stands for a field effect transistor, right? Which is a specific type of transistor that you would use as an amplifier stage, right? Similar to like a tube, right? Except this is solid state, or a JFET, right? So the FET input was on a little card that was on the side of the chassis, right? About the size maybe of a business card, something around like that. It had one transistor on it. It was fed from the B plus of the amplifier with a dropping resistor. So it ran at about 30 volts, I think, or something like that, right? And if you plugged into the FET input, it brought that circuit into the chain, the signal chain, before it went into the first stage. And it gave you, it was supposed to be for acoustics, I think, like piezoelectronic sort of pickups for an acoustic, so it could amplify it a little bit more. But it definitely gives you a boost, right? So Dumble was doing that in the 70s. The earliest example I could find is probably like 75, something like that, of him doing that. So it was known at that point. Guys were kind of putting transistors into amplifiers, right? So did Jose do that for him? Or did he take a color sound and just shove it in there, right? And that one knob was for the boost. I mean, this is a very good idea, right? This is kind of an interesting thing, because it solves some of the problems, right? It solves the problem of why that extra tube wasn't in there, why you would need the extra knob itself, the location of it, right? You could stick an entire circuit card over on the side of the amplifier and there wouldn't be anything. I don't see any extra mounting holes for mounting it, but that's not to say that it wasn't just glued down, or the screw holes are kind of not really visible in the photograph because maybe they're on the side of the chassis and you can't see that from those angles. So what I got that we can do, right, is to so I've got this. Let me just unplug the power supply. So this is this is the Dumble circuit, right, in the little pedal that I made like, I don't know, a long time ago, right? That was the beginnings of the Moto Teddy, right? So this is actually the very first Moto Teddy of any kind, is this, right? And it has that circuit in it. There's the bias control, and then there's the level, all right? So right now, you can run this on 30 and it sounds best, but we're going to run it on 18 because I couldn't find my 30 volt wall wart. All right, so we're going to try it out. So I'm going to plug it into our, yep, and now we've got our amplifier. It's been warming up and sitting there, so we'll get our guitar. Right, get our guitar out. And then we'll unmute the microphones for the guitar input. Right, and there we go. All right, so now we have the Marshmallow is up and running. All right, so I'm going to mute the microphone so we don't get the in there, right? And we'll listen to it, and then we'll put the Moto Teddy in there. Okay, keep that in your earphones. And then we're going to put on the Moto Teddy. All right, let's. Yeah, I think that's, to my ears, it sounds pretty cool, right? So let's listen to, I'll just, you know. It's possible, right? I think it has some of that. It doesn't. Yeah, to me, it sounds better than the EQ, for sure. I think it sounds better than the overdrive pedals because it's not as colored, right? It still sounds like the amplifier. It just has, more voltage pushing that first preamp tube, right? So it definitely still sounds like the Plexi, right? It doesn't take on the color of the distortion pedal. So let's hear a little more of it. So that's a possibility, right? That inside of that chassis was this sort of little circuit, right? So now when you run that circuit off of the B plus, right, and you can get the voltage up higher, it does sound even clearer to my ears, right? Because this particular transistor, particular transistor that Dumble used was really meant to work on about 35 volts. So it's very possible that, that what was going on. So that's a good idea. In terms of building things, right? So one of the things I did try after we talked last time was to change the cathode follower circuit, right? And change the cathode follower circuit to be two stages, right? So I would use to add gain to it. I split the two halves of the tube off, right? In the first half, the first triode became a gain stage plate driven, and then I brought it out to a volume pot, like on a little trim pot, and then rerouted it back into the second triode of the cathode follower and just used that as basically a cathode follower, right? I just used a took the signal off the cathode of the power tube and kept most of the circuit on the card intact, right? All that was needed was to clip the wire that goes from the plate of the first triode to the grid of the second triode. And that was it. And then just insert a capacitor in a volume pot. And that was all that was necessary. So it was very easy. But it sounded terrible. I just thought it didn't sound like a plexi anymore. It just sounded weird to me. So I don't think that's the case, right? I'm more likely to believe that this may have been sort of more have been closer to that sort of thing. Okay, yeah. So I think that's there may be some fruit to bear there too, right? What was that? Oh, no, that's just the phone downstairs ringing. Those phones put off so much EMF, it's ridiculous. Okay, so I think that's good for today, and want to thanks for watching, and I hope that we can keep this going with some more comments and some more ideas, some more things to try out. Next week, I'm going to try out the custom, right? The Seymour Duncan custom in this setup. I think it might really work. I think... It might be just the ticket in this guitar. So let's try it out. All right. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week at the latest.